everyone. My name is Gielen.
My name is
Nomeda and myself, we are artists and curators of the Swan Pavilion, which is articulated as a Swan School. So welcome to the Swan School. Pavilion Palude, Squall Palude. Welcome everyone, and it's a great pleasure to welcome today Pascal, Gielen, Antonio Negri, and scientists together, and
Nico Dockx.
He's cooking soup. So.
and all of you. This Swan School is a collective and collaborative effort of several constituencies and platforms internationally and locally. The Swan School we conceive as the disobedient, resistant, and resilient effort. As you know, that the swans through the history of humanity, they were always on the pathway of modernization and rationalization. In Lithuania, where we come from, swans were not only resisting Christianity, given that Lithuania was the last European country to be Christianized, but it was also a place for resistance during the wartime and after the Second World War. Resisting collectivization and industrial agriculture. And also remembering Great Ismail Swamp, that was the hideout for the African American slaves, otherwise known as Maroons, who found their survival in the swamp. We want to insist the swamp as a place of resilience and resistance, and also with the changing climate, and also with the changing political situation, we see the swamp as a place that can help us to adapt for the changing future. Therefore, there is a swamp as a future learning environment. And it is a great pleasure to welcome today our guest, and as I introduced also earlier, Nico Dockx, scientist, and sociologist Pascal, Gielen, are interlocutors of the third chapter of the Swan School, known as the Commonism. So please join me in welcoming our guest tonight, and I give the word to Pascal Gielen.
Good evening. Thank you for inviting us here and being here with us. I just practical. There are still seats here if you want to sit. I just say something practical things about the order of the evening. First, I will introduce the book which we made, which is standing here. And also, I will say a little bit about the background of the book series in which it is involved, and what the ideas of the book. And then I go immediately to my very honored special guests, Antonio Negri and Santiago Ciregua. I say it right? Ciregua. Sorry, my Spanish is still not yet.
Yeah, no.
I'm very honored they are here. They are also both in the book, so it's for me very important. And I have to say I'm a little bit shaking because they're great people. So they really influences my thinking, my work, and they are very inspiring to me. Sorry, I have this always at such moments. great honor to have Santi is for me somebody who really, as an artist, is really making at this moment, I think, the art that is necessary and what I call also really art nowadays, and that's why I find it inspiring. Antonio Negri, I think I read already a long time when I was studying sociology, Negri's work. But a book which really hit me in the face, I think it was in 1999, was Empire. It's written together with Michael Hart. And it really shifted my way in thinking, operating, etc. And doing research, thinking about research, thinking about objectivity and subjectivity in research, for example. Okay, so order of the day, I mentioned already, I will introduce a little bit about the book, say a little bit about the book and the content about the book, and then we have the debate. Santiago will introduce a little bit, say 10 minutes, something about his work. Then Antonio Negri will give a lecture of 15-20 minutes, which is translated for you, so it will be in Italian, but it is translated in English, not synchron, but diaphragm. And then we have a very small, I think, discussion between two of us, of the answering dialogue, and then I immediately give the floor to you. And we round up wrap up at 8 o'clock, when there is still a performance and soup. This is the book, and I want to make one practical, again, last announcement or question to you. Somebody who used this book and bought this book is standing there, and he has written a lot of notes in it, but he has lost it today. So if somebody in this room finds this book again, please give it to him. Maybe you have to show your face and that everybody knows. No, that's not good. You really have to show your face, otherwise they don't know. Okay, I'm not talking. I want to talk about this book. This is I think, the 24th in the book in the series we made. And the series is called Antenna, Arts and Society, in which we use the antenna as a metaphor for things which are feelers or something like that in society in general, and which try to explore what is happening in society in a broader sense. Society also, I mean also the environment, ecology, in politics, economy, etc. So we always look at the relationship, to say it blunt, between art and society in a broad sense. And in fact, I want to say a little bit about how the book is composed, but in fact all the books in this series are composed like that. I just want to say a little bit about how we compose them and why we compose them like we compose them. And it has really very much to do with my own development and my own experiences as a researcher and a sociologist. I was schooled as a classical sociologist to do empirical research. So that means collecting data, doing interviews in general. At a certain moment in my life, I was invited to do a PhD research, which I decided to do on sociology of art. And the content of this PhD is not important, but I was, by doing this research, of course, confronted with a lot of artists. I interviewed a lot of artists. and at that moment I saw that there was really something missing in the sociology of art and the sociology of culture. And that was in fact the art itself. So a lot of sociologists like Pierre Bourdieu, for example, who's quite known, etc., are always talking around the art but never touch the art itself, or say it better, never let touch the art science itself. And so this was for me a very important moment to rethink about what is sociology of art, what is doing science with artists, and how can you take also the artist and the sociologist seriously in such a thing. And then again, I mentioned already, I was already a little bit via the work of Pierre Bourdieu involved in critical theory, critical thinking. But I rediscovered this again by reading Empire, which I mentioned already. That's where critical theory comes in, which really hits me in the face in that sense. This book explains, for me, I saw it really as a prediction. It's written in, I think it's written in 1998. Empire. Yeah. So and what for me was very interesting in the book is that in a way they foresee what will happen in 9/11. You can predict it also. You can get it out of the book from me. But what's more interesting is how they come to this prediction. And that's, they say, yes, it is, as I say it very blunt, of course, how the world constellation is now. This will happen. And this did me think at my own research practice that there is always a kind of bigger story which explains a certain situation, a certain condition. And I saw this really also in my own practice as a sociologist of culture in a completely different way. That at a certain moment I discovered that all those researchers in sociology and culture, they also follow a kind of hidden agenda. For example, in the 1980s, you can get good research grants when you do something with cultural diversity. Nowadays, you get a research grant. Sorry, I have to do that. You get a research grant when you do something with cultural entrepreneurship or creative cities or sustainability. So also there in research, I saw that there is working a bigger story, which I call an ideology, which organized the agenda of researchers and sociologists in general. And so this is made up my own praxis. I stayed a sociologist, I try to let me inform by subjective stories, artworks itself, try to incorporate them in theorizing, in empirical research, but also thinking, and that's where critical theory for me comes in, is really thinking about why do I ask the questions I'm questioning at this moment? Where do they come from? Why are certain research questions dominant, etc.? This sounds a little bit as a personal story, but in fact, the result is how the books are composed. So in the books you can find very dry academic articles at one side, and on the other hand you can find a manifesto of an artist, you can find artworks in it, you can find very speculative manifestos in it, or you can find speculative interviews in it, etc. And for me this mixture is very important, because this is exactly this mixture what is also in the book. It's also a critique on the whole series, always we get. It's so heterogeneous But I think this heterogeneous way of thinking is for me very important to focus on one subject, for example, let's say. A little bit about the book. I immediately go to the content table, let's say it like that. But the fact we discussed a lot about the title of the book. I think for me, myself, the idea of commons comes in again by reading Commonwealth, 2009, I guess. But it becomes also very important in my own research. But I have to confess, nowadays it becomes also a kind of fashion. And that's also where we started thinking about the idea, can commons be a new kind of ideology, a belief system? Just because there are so many people, researchers, but also politicians, right-wing, left-wing, using again and again, and maybe abusing also this word of the commons. So in this book we to try to analyze, take a distance of this discourse in a way, even when we think that the field of the commons, let's call it like that, is a very worthwhile thing to explore. And we certainly, as editors, believe in the potentiality of it. But at the same time, we see also the traps that it can become a kind of fashionable ideology which can be used and abused in different ways. And that's what we try to do, explain in the book. I don't go further into the content, for that you have to read it, and you will also detect, I think, a little bit about the content in the talks afterwards. Just say to thank you all the contributors to the book, and also the organizations who made it financial, but also in an organizational way, things which we are standing on here. I now give the word to Santiago, and I will put for that, to introduce this organization, I put for that on his organization.
But first,
Yeah.
Don't worry, I'm Santiago from Sevilla.
Yeah.
Okay, from Spain, you know. Thank you to invite me, of course. Thank you to be here with friends, with the different person I respect so much. But I have 10 minutes only to express, to try to show some things to talk later with all people, talking about the commons, I suppose. And it's very fast. It's only when now we are a team, we are a family, with people from around the world in Sevilla, but in Madrid too. And I can go there to pass.
Okay.
Okay? And I want to only express our position. During the last 20 years, it was at first me alone, working with, at first my community, my neighbors, trying to understand, like a child, not a child, 22 years old, to try how to connect with the official politics and how we have the right to move, to change, to demand, to attack, to go against, or to invent together a new common politics. Like the same to have the right using the law, to have the right to pay a very simple way for the people. How, for me, 20 years ago, thinking and listening people that they want to have a playground in Sevilla, but it's impossible because the law say that in the old center, in that period of time, it was impossible, but at the end you make it, and you demand yourself how you are trying to in my own city to understand the regulation, the law, to modify, to make a new space for another uses that not the urban planning office decide and demanding you making one small house in one scaffolding. Pascal loves to say that I'm an artist. I say always no, I'm architect. The difference is only because I always say that architect have a responsibility. The artist decides if he or she has a responsibility. So sometimes we stop illegal projects from the city. We normally make a legal or illegal, but many times are the city, the government, the politicians who make illegal situations, so sometimes you must fight with them. Sometimes squatting empty sites and then demanding yourself. Because the civil disobedience is to make one illegal or illegal situation and say we are making because we think it's correct. Could be illegal by now. In 2-3 years we can change the law. If not, we can change the rights. Sometimes, like Madrid, making in one night 11 kilometers for bikes, of course, in the next day disappear because appear the police, and you are shouting that you want, not you is the commons. Many people decide to make that. Now they have one. I don't know if it was okay for that question. Sometimes making very small projects, we say always that we are moving between longer projects, more difficult, with more complexity, but it's like the people who go to the gym, not me, and then you make small things. It was from one squatter, at the end it was a cabin, a telephone, a free telephone for people who wanted to call to Colombia, to Israel, or many different countries, and it was in Madrid illegal, totally illegal, and there are many small projects, but you need it to have the energy to work for the others. Sometimes making illegal benches in Coruña, sometimes making another illegal benches in Mexico, and now it's from, I started alone, but during the last 18 years we are a group, amazing, beautiful group. Now fighting with the government in Sevilla because they are cutting all the trees in the public schools. It's stupid. So they cut, they put concrete, and then we spend our money to make new holes, to make new trees. It's stupid. And now we are more professional. It was 3 months ago, cutting concrete in 3 different public schools that they spent so much, 4 million euros in 10 schools in Sevilla, cutting all the trees. And all the teachers, the families, the kids say, who decide? So the problem is who decide that question. In summer, when the schools are closed, some technicians decide to cut and then to make more concrete. And then in September we start to cut again the concrete. It's stupid. So it's happy one day with beer, with a beautiful group of families. It's nice. But when you make 3-4 times, I feel stupid. So you need to go to demand the politicians, the technicians, and all. But every day you are trying to make different projects. Sometimes cutting a highway in Canarias, because it was illegal at the highway. All the German guys, all the tourists go to the beautiful beaches there. But at the end, one day you take money and you cut the road, and of course a picture for my mom. But it's very important not only to make it. And I don't know, but only one of that project is made inside the art world. All of them are free. It's Pepe's house, the first illegal house we made. Fuck me, it's my family. It's my love. It's Alisa too. Sorry. I forget it, sorry. And it was 18 years ago to make one illegal house when Europe appeared in our life. At first I was from Spain, then I was for Europe, and it was more problem to go, how I can connect with Europe? Who is Europe? Where is the building? You know, the city hall, you go there. The urban planning office, you go. But Europe, where I go? So you can ask, you can demand, you can have a technician from Europe. Who is the technician from Europe? So in that moment, I don't want to speak so much. You make it 1 million house, you demand yourself. It's a civil disobedience, attacking a system. It was in Madrid the same. Illegal housing on the roof, not for private people. It was for communities. It was for a squatter in Madrid. Sometimes you want to be legal. Sometimes we want to be legal, absolutely. And we try in our state constitution in Spain and Italy and Germany, you have the right to the culture, for art. Then appear a law that talk about art, culture, and then we want to collaborate because in Sevilla, in Andalusia, we have 8 million person. We have a school of jazz. We have a school of circus. And you want to propose. You have the right to propose to the city, to your government. Then they don't give you money, but at the end you make a school of circus, you make a school of jazz, and at the end 4 years later they attack you and they send the police during more than 10 times and you disappear. It's a pity, but you are using the rights, because when you want to be legal, it's more difficult than being illegal. And I finish sometimes, I don't know how do you know your law about how to connect with the administration? If you don't know how to read, to write, do you have the same rights that you are from the university, or different? So it was a very stupid situation that we went to pay a licensing with the circus, and the people decided to go like the circus, at least, who is calling me. And at the end, the people thought that we were from the 50 men. So when appear and the police appear, and you are from the 50 men from Madrid, they go, no, we only want to pay a license. But you appear like a clowns, like fighting. No, but we have the right to appear in the urban planning office, like I want to be. So it was a very simple. Sometimes we are more elegant, like now, and of course more elegant because we need more money. Okay, but it's a joke. Okay, and I am finishing now. 2 minutes more is when we try to be totally legal. Because appear many different families. It was 2 years ago in Sevilla, and many different women normally that they decide to demand that they have a need, a real need that appear in the law. If you have a public school, you need a place to have lunch, to study, and to make different activities. So in that school, they haven't. So they were fighting, attacking, asking the regional politicians to say, it's our rights. So at the end they invite us, because sometimes we make very beautiful projects, not always, and it's very stupid or not. It's the first license in Spain, and I think in Europe, it's from 2 years ago, where permit people to work. For me, that is the commons. The people, with the crisis, the government say, we have any money to make that project, but you have the right, we know. It's okay, we will make it. No, you can't make it, it's our responsibility. They go, no, not now. If you spend so much time without any solution, we can and we have the right to use the law against you. It's real. I always say, who of you are the first world, the first level of intelligence, university, MIT and all of them, okay? And who of you know about the law about participation in your country? Who read? You have a law, you know? A law about participation law. And in that law appears that you have the right to make common politics between the citizen and the official government. That you decide each 4 years voting who is. But you don't know. But it's okay, don't worry. Tomorrow we have time to look for. Okay, that is a regulation now, a regulation to make with children, it's possible, or with different type of person, diversity, for age, difference, functional difference, and all, to involve to make that building. At the end, we make beautiful sometimes. Elvira said that it's very elegant for us, but it's beautiful. And it's a permanent building. It's an art. I think it's activism, because all the families who decide to attack and make the decision, nearly 400 people working here from 35 different nationalities, and it's real now. Of course, we play with happiness, with freedom when we work in each project. Action, happiness, and freedom is the most beautiful human. The knowledge, I know too. The commons, of course, we are animals from communities. But at the same time, it's a pity, because at the same time, I am finishing, 1 minute. At the same time, we made very legal process with the politician attacking, but listening together. 300 people trying to make, with the third part of the money, a real building for a student in a public school. But at the same time, we were in Madrid. And in that moment, it was impossible to be legal. But the energy of more than 200 students and teachers and people, they say, we can't wait for the bureaucracy. So we started a building, illegal building, and by now it's still illegal, but we are now in Venice, so it's okay to say. And we built another type of building, a Frankenstein, I don't know. It's a permanent building, not so beautiful like the other. Perhaps that is more ugly. I always make the joke that people say the process is beautiful, involving people, but at the end the architecture is ugly. Talking about beauty, the normal concept of beauty. At the end, I always say that all of you have an ugly friend that you love. It's a good answer. The name is Philippe or Pascal, and he's intelligent, he's happy, he invites you beer, and he's lovely. But it's ugly, and his mother knows too. So all people know. So it's nice at the end. Talking about the beauty, it's at the end for us is to involve more people, and at the end, sometimes trying to collaborate with a city. You know that project it was in Catalonia, and in front of it that is the city hall from a city from 100,000. Person, and trying to collaborate, one squatter trying to be legal with the city, collaborating with the money, and at the end that's happened. It was a pity. So the last three projects was one totally legal, the other totally illegal. The third tried to connect the activists from that city with the the police are still on time, they have cameras, it's the city halls. We were there with many different people, squatters, that we try to be legal. And at the end, we know the group who make fire with us. Absolutely. But it's better not to say for not making more fights, violence. So you must to stop and then to think about the next. So thank you. Who was? I will see you later.
Thank you. Maybe just also the moment I prefer to let first Santiago give him the word to explain what the book is about, because you immediately have a very specific example of how it works. But this is for me one of the things what is commoning about. It is making sources free that people can use them, like a school, for example, or like a structure for homeless people, etc. So that you can make, that's for me the basic principle of common is sharing or making resources available for more people. And then when you look at how people in this field, artists, architects, but also scientists operate often in this field, it is often between, I use it as a joke, between creativity and criminality. It is often in this very strange zone in between. It's what Santiago says, illegal. And that means literally that the government at a certain moment can say, yes, we agree and we regulate, or they say no and we try to destroy your practice. But it's very interesting for me, and that's also what the book is about, what is the aesthetics of it, what's the outcome of it. You said it's already very ugly, but for me it's also the whole process is in fact aesthetics in that sense that it is giving form to things, but also giving form to social processes, giving form to communities in a society. Anyway, it's no time to give the word to Antonio Negri. You have the floor, please.
It's difficult now because I have these things.
Io sono molto più noioso veramente, quindi non è il predecessore.
Sorry. Representation is much more boring than my predecessor. The mic is alive.
Intervengo appunto piuttosto sul comunismo, sul lavoro di Pascal Gielen.
I'm going to talk about communism of the work by Pascal Gielen.
E questo comunismo era un po' una sensazione analoga a quella che mi ha spinto a scrivere Activism, un libro che è uscito già Oxford University Press 6 mesi fa e che appare in Italia nei prossimi giorni.
Now, faced with the principle of communism, I feel very similar to the way I felt when I was writing Assembly, a book that was published 6 months ago by Oxford University Press and which is about to be published shortly in Italian.
Questa sensazione mi porta sinceramente a ritrovare nella concretezza storica quei comportamenti, quelle percezioni, quei pensieri che voi artisti create nel mondo dell'immaginazione.
So I felt urged to find in the tangible nature of history the behaviors, perceptions and thoughts that you as artists devise in the world of imagination.
Comunismo. Io credo che a questa parola vanno riportate quelle grandi esperienze che a New York, in Europa, nel Maghreb, in Medio Oriente, si sono date dopo il 2010 o 2011. E sembrava che sorgessero da una sorgente comune, da un'accumulazione di sofferenze e desideri che la crisi economica aveva moltiplicato, ma che erano già prima costituiti nel mezzo di quelle trasformazioni della società e del lavoro che il neoliberalismo trionfante aveva provocato. Prima di tutto nel mondo del lavoro, generando miseria e introducendo condizioni estreme di mobilità e di flessibilità, vale a dire una precarizzazione e una subordinazione massiccia della forza lavoro.
Communism. To this word, I believe that are related those sweeping experiences which took place in New York, Europe, Maghreb, in Northern Africa, and in the Middle East, starting in 2010-2011. Those literally seem to spring from a common source, an accumulation of sorrows and desires, which had started to develop in the midst of the transformation of the society and labor that the triumph of neoliberalism had sparked, and that had been further multiplied by the economic crisis. In the labor context, such transformations had generated poverty, leading to extreme mobility and flexibility, thus making a large part of the labor force lose their stability and independence.
Ora, quello che c'era di originale e di irriducibile negli eventi di resistenza che si sono dati dopo il 2010 è consistito nelle nuove esperienze di organizzazione che si sono date la nuova forza lavoro precaria che si riuniva nelle piazze, si assemblava e si organizzava in esperienze comuni di incontro e di vita condivisa, di lotte. In Activism, Michael Hart e io ci siamo chiesti se queste nuove forme di protesta potessero essere definiti come nuovi comportamenti di resistenza davanti alla nuova organizzazione capitalista del lavoro. Un lavoro che, malgrado la miserabile precarizzazione che gli è già stata imposta, rivela comunque, tuttavia, una trama di cooperazione sociale, una nuova potenza produttiva di cui il capitalismo tenta di impadronirsi.
The civil resistance events that took place after 2010 had some strong and innovative features in the way they were organized. The new precarious workers would get together and organize meetings, share time of their lives, and join in the struggle. In assembly, Michael Hart and I wondered whether these new forms of protest could be termed as new resistance behaviors, resistance to the new capitalist work organization. Despite the hardly precarious working conditions that had been imposed, labour still showed some degree of social cooperation, a new productive power that capitalism had tried to get hold of.
C'è un paradosso nello sviluppo del capitalismo che si ripete anche oggi, anche qui. Oggi, nelle nuove condizioni biopolitiche della produzione, c'è una resistenza nuova contro la sostituzione delle popolazioni nel capitale. Le nuove forme di sfruttamento sono contestate, le nuove forme di sfruttamento, cioè l'estrazione della ricchezza sociale attraverso la finanza. Questo estrattivismo e la nuova resistenza che esso suscita rivelano nello scontro ad un tempo la sofferenza dei lavoratori e dall'altra la forza produttiva della cooperazione sociale. Quello che lega le esperienze di lotta che appaiono da una decina d'anni è, se vi permettete di evacuare ogni contenuto metafisico dell'espressione, il rovesciamento della nuova ontologia dello sfruttamento. Nelle assemblee ciò che si è organizzata è la resistenza allo sfruttamento sociale che il capitalismo esercita oggi, la resistenza a fronte delle nuove pratiche estrattive di questo lavoro. Nella Campanas e nelle piazze occupate si costruisce, si afferma al contrario un altro senso, nuovo e rovesciato, dell'esperienza della cooperazione produttiva. Qui si pone in evidenza: il comune viene prima del potere, il comune precede il potere.
There is a paradox in the development of capitalism that can be detected here as well. Today, under the new biopolitical conditions of production, there's a new resistance against subsumption of people in the capital, the new forms of exploitation, that is, extraction of social wealth by means of finance. These are being challenged and criticized. This new extractivism of social wealth and a new determination it triggers reveal in the struggle both workers' sufferings and the production force of social cooperation. What links together the struggles of the past decade, if I may do away with any metaphysical meaning from the phrase I'm about to use, is the overturning of the new ontology of exploitation. In the assemblies, the resistance was organized against social exploitation as performed by capitalism. Resistance against the new practice of extracting surplus value. Indeed, in the acampadas, or occupation of public places, a new meaning develops, new and turned upside down, a new meaning of the experience of productive cooperation. A new truism comes to the fore. The commons comes before the power. Communism precedes power.
Nel nostro libro Assembly con Michael ho tentato di analizzare le condizioni materiali, strutturali e politiche delle nuove forme costituenti della resistenza. Noi abbiamo tentato di comprendere la ragione, la causa efficiente di questi nuovi fenomeni di organizzazione. Non si trattava solamente di interrogare le nuove forme di assemblea che si davano, ma per esempio di comprendere una loro caratteristica singolare. Queste assemblee rifiutano ogni forma di leadership estesa nel tempo. Probabilmente questo rifiuto deriva dai comportamenti e dai modi di vita del nuovo proletariato politico che si ritrova nelle assemblee. Questo nuovo proletariato, che implica una composizione di classe completamente nuova e le cui attività e produttività debordano lo stretto quadro a cui si riduceva il lavoro in quanto lavoro salariato, rappresenta il libero rovesciamento della cooperazione forzata alla quale quei medesimi soggetti sono obbligati sotto il comando capitalista.
I'm sorry. In our book Assembly, together with Michael, I have analyzed the political, structural and material conditions of the new constituent forms of resistance in an attempt to understand the reason, the cause, the agent of these new organization phenomena. It was not just a matter of speculating on or challenging the new forms of assembly that were taking place. We tried to understand a very unusual phenomenon in that such assemblies rejected any form of leadership extended over time. Probably the rejection derived from the behaviors and modes of life of the new cognitive proletariat participating at the assemblies. This new proletariat, featuring a totally new class composition whose activity and productivity exceed the narrow constraints of wage labor, represents a turning upside down of forced cooperation as imposed by capitalistic power.
Si tratta dunque di una nuova figura, di una nuova comprensione del lavoro cognitivo che fonda la sua produttività sui linguaggi, i rapporti operativi e immateriali, gli affetti e le relazioni in generale. La sua grande autonomia si realizza appunto nella cooperazione. La leadership deve calarsi dentro questa cooperazione e servirla. Si potrebbe dire che solo la cooperazione è performativa. Una volta assunto questo tema e posto a base dell'emergenza dei movimenti e delle assemblee, bisogna chiedersi verso cosa si orienti questa Costituzione. È su questo orientamento, su queste finalità, che si pone la questione di legittimità dei movimenti. L'accesso massiccio agli spazi pubblici ed in particolare alle piazze ha anche dato luogo, non a caso, a dei fenomeni reazionari di tipo populista.
It is a new form with a new understanding of cognitive labor, where productivity is based on languages, operational and immaterial relations, affections and relationships in general. Its great autonomy is in fact realized in cooperation. Leadership should delve into this cooperation and be of service to it. Only cooperation could be referred to as performative. Based on this assumption, and considering this as the basis of the new surfacing of movements and assemblies, one should wonder where to this new form is directing itself. And it is based on the direction taken, on the objective pursued, that the legitimacy of the movement is questioned. It is no coincidence that the massive access to public spaces, and in particular to the city squares, had led to populist reactionary phenomena.
Prendete sul serio le assemblee, il communism, qual è il criterio che ci permette di comprendere verso quale fine essi si dirigono e come parteciparvi? Per rispondere a questa questione permettetemi un sotterfugio, citandovi qualche riga di Marx, che risale al 1844, a commento dei suoi incontri con degli operai parigini. Puoi tradurre direttamente?
Sì, ok.
No, anche il primo pezzo che prende.
Leggo la citazione. Okay. Taking assemblies, communism into serious consideration, what is the guiding principle leading to the understanding of the objective of such assemblies and how to be involved in them? To answer this question, let me resort to a slight deception. Let me quote a few lines from Marx, dating back to 1844. While commenting on his meetings with Parisian workers, he wrote, and I quote, "When communist artisans associate with one another, theory, propaganda, etc. is their first end. But at the same time, as a result of this association, they acquire a new need, the need for society. And what appears as a means becomes an end. In this practical process, the most splendid results are to be observed whenever French socialist workers are seen together. Such things as smoking, drinking, eating, etc. are no longer means of contact or means that bring them together. Association, society, and conversation, which again have association as its end, are enough for them. The brotherhood of man is not a mere phrase with them, but a fact of life, and the nobility of man shines upon them from their work-hardened bodies. End of the quotation.
A partire da queste righe non è difficile ritornare alla nostra questione. Marx dice che gli operai si riuniscono per riappropriarsi le relazioni sociali complesse di cui essi sono paradossalmente espropriati e sentono che questa loro riunione è il paradigma del loro comunismo, insieme, banchi di sé e prova di una futura fraternità umana. C'era un processo di soggettivazione antagonista che prende forma contro ciò che l'alienazione e lo sfruttamento generano. La fatica dei giorni di lavoro che si imprime in maniera visibile nei tratti induriti dei volti di cui ci parla Marx. E ciò, malgrado tutto, è qualcosa che dà una dignità al lavoro.
These few lines takes us back to our previous question. Marx states that the workers, artisans, associate with one another to take ownership of complex social relationships they had been deprived of. And they feel that this association is the paradigm of their communism, the bench and evidence at the same time of a future brotherhood of men. There's a process of antagonistic subjectivization which is being formed against what alienation and exploitation have generated. The fatigue of working days visibly marks the work-hardened faces Marx referred to. And next to it, nevertheless, there is something like the dignity of work.
E dunque, qual è il rapporto fra quelle riunioni operaie e le acampadas di questo inizio del secolo XXI? Anche le acampadas sono dei momenti di approfondimento di un sapere operaio mobilitato contro lo sfruttamento. Sono delle occasioni di soggettivazione antagonista. Bisogna intendersi qui. Ancora una volta, quando noi diciamo lavoro, quando diciamo sapere operaio, noi diciamo la totalità delle forme della potenza produttiva, noi diciamo il sapere costruito attraverso, dalla cooperazione sociale, il che significa che alla qualità performativa dell'incontro politico bisogna aggiungere il fatto di essere insieme nella durata, nell'immediatezza e nella continuità dello scontro. C'è una potenza costituente di cui questa occupazione dello spazio è il segno.
What is the connection then between those workers' associations and the acampadas of the early 21st century? The acampadas too provided opportunities for deepening workers' knowledge on exploitation, for antagonistic subjectivization. To clarify, all references to work and workers' knowledge refer to the totality of the forms of productive power. The knowledge built thanks to, within, by social cooperation, so which entails that on top of the performative quality of the political counter, the fact of being together should be added continuously throughout the duration of the struggle. There is a constituent power evidenced by the very occupation of public spaces.
In Assembly noi abbiamo insistito sul fatto che le condizioni di definizione e di costruzione di questo processo di assemblaggio, condizioni attraverso le quali l'azione dei movimenti trova una prospettiva strategica, sono costituite dal riconoscimento del comune. È un terreno che include e sviluppa l'eguaglianza, un terreno sul quale l'universalità dei principi passa attraverso l'assemblaggio dei corpi. Se nell'assemblea il dolore e la potenza dei corpi si incrociano, è la prospettiva del comune che orienta oggi le forme più potenti della politica sovversiva, perché bisogna letteralmente strappare il lavoro vivo alle forme del lavoro sfruttato, perché bisogna inventare un'impresa che sia quella del comune, perché le assemblee lavorano, vale a dire che producono dei nuovi modi di vita, che nella misura in cui si presentano come spazi e momenti del comune costituiscono un contropotere nel rapporto alle forme di alienazione prodotte dalla sostituzione capitalista della vita.
In assembly, we insisted on the fact that the conditions defining and constructing this assembly process, conditions through which the actions of movements find a strategic perspective, are intrinsic in the acknowledgement of the common. Such conditions provide a ground where equality is intrinsic and thrives, a ground where universal principles are intertwined with the assembly of bodies. If in the assembly the sufferings and power of bodies are mixed together, it is the prospect of the common which guides, shapes the most powerful forms of subversive politics. Living labour should be literally torn apart from exploitation of labour. As a new enterprise should be conceived, that of the common. Assemblies do work as they produce new ways of life. They appear as spaces or opportunities of the common. They represent a counterpower vis-à-vis the alienation generated by the capitalist subsumption of life.
È così che possono essere inventate delle nuove istituzioni adatte ai nuovi bisogni di quello che chiamiamo il proletariato precario e cognitivo. Il potere costituente non si presenta qui nelle forme dell'insurrezione o dell'eccezione. Esso è al contrario, per così dire, normalizzato dai movimenti d'assemblaggio che ne proiettano gli effetti di innovazione nella durata, dentro e contro le stesse operazioni di repressione statale e neoliberale. Lo spazio nel quale la risposta del proletariato precario assume criticamente la propria sofferenza ed il nemico che la produce è biopolitico. Non è dunque solamente lo spazio della produzione, ma anche quello della circolazione delle merci e della riproduzione della vita. Come non accorgersene dinanzi all'estrema importanza di un movimento come Ni Una Menos, un movimento che è partito dalla denuncia e dalla resistenza della violenza patriarcale, ha allargato la sua lotta a tutte le forme di violenza fatte alle donne e agli uomini, nella produzione e nella riproduzione.
Hence, new institutions can be conceived, adjusted to the new requirements of what has been termed as the precarious and cognitive proletariat. The constituent power does not appear as the power of insurrection or exception. It is in fact normalized by the assembly movement, projecting its innovative effects over time within and against the very repressive state neoliberal operations. The space within which the proletariat responds critically takes on its suffering and the enemy producing it, and it is biopolitical. Then it is not just a space for production, but also that for the circulation of goods and reproduction of life. Is it not clearly visible when considering the utmost importance of a movement such as Ni Una Menos, a movement which started off as an outcry against and resistance to patriarchal violence, to then embrace the fight against all forms of violence, against women and men, in the fear of production and reproduction?
Il comune è dunque quell'insieme cooperativo che assumiamo come forza performativa nelle nostre lotte contro lo sfruttamento e di nuovo come potenza performativa nel costruire soggettivazione comune. Il discorso politico e quello artistico trovano qui punti di collegamento certi. L'arte può svilupparsi come utopia propria, specifica, in direzione dell'orizzonte dei contenuti programmatici e storicamente effettivi del comune. Il comune è oggi quella grande forza produttiva che dobbiamo liberare dallo sfruttamento capitalista, soggettivandola e ricomponendo la soggettività nell'esperienza della vita.
The common is indeed the cooperative mix, which we assume as performative force in our struggle against exploitation, and again as our performative power in the construction of a common subjectivization. The political and artistic discourse find clear connections here. Art can develop itself as a utopia, leading to an horizon of pragmatic contents that are historically effective of the common. The common is that sweeping productive power to be freed, released from capitalist exploitation, making it subjective and framing the subjectivities in the experience of what is to come.
Vorrei aggiungere un'ultima cosa. All'inizio ho sentito dire che questa conferenza è intitolata La palude e ci si è riferiti alla palude della Lituania, dove c'è stata una resistenza contro i nazisti, contro i comunisti, contro i russi. Ora, e contro anche le forme di collettivizzazione. Io vorrei dire con precisione qui che quando si parla di comune si parla di qualcosa che non è né privato né pubblico. Quando si parla di comune si parla di quella forza che per esempio ha costruito nelle paludi Venezia. Venezia nasce dal comune, nella palude, nasce dall'invenzione comune di questa formidabile cosa che abbiamo sottomesso tutti. Il comune non è né privato né pubblico, non è né privato né statale, è costruire Venezia.
Let me say one last thing. At the beginning, I heard reference being made to the swamp. And specifically, the swamp of Lithuania was referred to, a swamp where the resistance against communism, against Nazism, against Russians, against collectivization obtained. Well, let me say that commons is neither public nor private. Commons is a force, is a building force. Commons is the force that led to the creation and the construction of Venice. So let me state again that commons is neither private nor public. It is a force that led to the creation of what we have under our feet, the city of Venice.
Very happy that you also talked about assembly. It's also one chapter in the book because we think it's a very important principle, not only in assembly as a meeting, but also or a tool to organizing common productivity, but also as an aesthetic form. And I think Santiago showed very well what assembly or assemblage literally means in the art. And what I think very interesting is assembly, assemblage. In both is that it is for me a contraposition of abstraction in finance economy. And with abstraction, I don't mean literally, in fact, dehumanizing products like buildings, etc. And by bringing people together to make constructions, also to make art constructions, to make architecture, you assemble and you rehumanize, I think, the whole production process again. But I have a question for you both, and I also I hope to try to make a connection. I was impressed by the end of the interview we did for the book with Antonio Negri, in which we asked him, the last question was what will you give to the next generation? So what is for you important in your own life to give? And he says, what is in fact the most important for my life was that I was always an activist. So maybe not being the philosopher, not being the sociologist, or being the philosopher and the sociologist as my drive for this all was this communist activism in it. It's what he calls, and that's where we land also the beautiful title of the interview on. He says the communist activism is the salt of the earth. I use this phrase to make a connection, or try to discover what the connection could be between, at one side, the practice you also practice, that means highly theorizing, think, conceptualizing phenomena in society, and at the other side, doing things in society where something is standing for and being the real activist. I certainly know that Professor Negri has also his activist past and still is an activist. But what I see nowadays, for example, in the art world, is that there is a kind of, I call it a bifurcation. You have one side, beautiful debates like this, where we theorize and talk very political terms, but in fact don't do things. And I want to ask both of you how one side, how activism nowadays and activist practices can inform better theorizing, better conceptualizing, but also the other way around. How do you use concepts, how do you use theories to really, on the spot, make changes? I don't know who wants to start with answering. It's up to you. Do you want?
For me, of course, I say that the concept, the people, the academy, sometimes it's good to spend some time learning, reading. But of course, in my experience, my human experience, my political experience, is more important to have a real action. In the same time, we can have the action. We are trying to change, involving people, trying to move with the law. Of course, the concept is with you, but at the end, if you can spend all that time speaking to make love, and if you make love, you have the experience to make love. It's the same. I could speak about activists on the desk, talk about some different experience, but at the end, for me, it's a short experience, only to be there. In that case, of course, there is a relation. We need both, of course. We need both for the action. Because sometimes I need the university, the experience, because sometimes when we are proposing, demanding, shouting to the politician or the technician, sometimes they trust more in the academy than the people who are activists. So sometimes we need to go against or go to talk with them, with the academy too. But sometimes the academy disappear. Like it's the only, we ask the academy. It's a small part to be there only 10 minutes to collaborate with us. At the end, we are outside day by day. We haven't in our office, our team, we haven't any time to update our web. In 3 years, it's impossible. We haven't time. We are day by day trying to be the next Monday morning at 8 with different groups working, and it's a pity. So I know at the end, when I read Tony, when I read you, sometimes you think, okay, it's the energy I need. But the energy I need not only for me, it's only to change the mind of different politicians or technicians that they always say, I don't trust in you. Because you know what, the academy and the people have the knowledge, not me. I'm only an activist making dreams and making hopes. So we need to be together, of course. And that's still, of course, before the other. Yep.
Ma io non mi sento. Io non mi sento Michele. E cioè, io ero un ragazzo giovane che ha imparato a molte cose, Descartes, Kant, Hegel, ha lavorato su questo, è diventato professore universitario, giovanissimo. E appena è diventato professore universitario si è accorto che la pratica, l'attività era più importante dell'accademia.
Okay. I don't feel a member of the academia myself. I don't feel a university professor. I used to be a young man. I used to study. I studied Descartes. I studied Hegel, and then I worked. Can you hear me? Okay. And I became very young a professor, a university professor, and soon I realized that what I need was practice, was action. Non penso che funzioni.
Cioè, lo stesso studio mi ha spinto all'azione, perché non riconoscevo più il mondo che mi stava attorno come qualcosa che avesse a fare col sapere che avevo. Come voi sapete, i filosofi interpretano il mondo, ma il mondo è una brutta cosa molto spesso, è pieno di dolore, è pieno di fatica, è pieno di incapacità di vivere e sopravvivere. Quindi bisogna capire perché, e bisogna capire come si inserisce la propria libertà all'interno di questa generale alienazione, di questa generale fatica di vivere.
Well, when I was studying, the very studying urged me to take action because I didn't see the world that corresponded to what I learned. You know, philosophers try to interpret the world, but at the same time, you know that the world is full of sorrow, it's full of fatigue and incapability to survive and live. So we must understand why. We have to ask ourselves why this is the case. And we must act against this alienation and this fatigue of living.
Ad aiutare gli operai a fare gli scioperi, ad aiutare i giovani ad occupare le case, a fare tutte le cose che fa questo nostro compagno bravo. E così mi hanno espulso dall'università. E io non sono più da 40 anni, 50, dalla fine degli anni 70 professore. Mi chiamano ancora professore, ma veramente non lo merito.
So I started off supporting workers and people in their strikes, supporting squatters, very much as the gentleman that sits next to me. So I got kicked off by university, and over the past 50 years, indeed, I was no professor. People still call me a professor, but I'm none.
Ecco che cosa insegnavo? Insegnavo a fare inchiesta, cioè a chiedersi, a ciascuno che chiedersi in tutte le cose, no? Filosofo, storico, artista. Che cos'è il mondo che ha di fianco, davanti a me? Come è fatto? Come è fatto cioè come vive questa gente? Quante ore dorme? Perché dormire è già una conquista. Ci sono molti miei amici che non riuscivano a dormire perché andavano in fabbrica alle 4 di mattina e uscivano la sera. E come mangiano? E come educano i loro bambini? Cioè, le condizioni materiali nelle quali noi viviamo, le condizioni materiali in cui vivono quelli accanto a noi, la trasformazione enorme nella quale sono vissuto. Io sono figlio di operai, i miei vecchi andavano a lavorare in fabbrica. Oggi le fabbriche non ci sono più, o meglio, ce ne sono molte meno. Però poi ci sono quelle altre fabbriche, quelle in cui si lavora con la testa, le fabbriche davanti agli ordinatori. Capire per esempio questo passaggio è stata una cosa per me molto difficile, ma molto importante. L'inchiesta, capire la realtà, vedere come si muove. E all'interno di questa realtà gettare, no?
So when I was a professor, what did I teach my students? I taught them how to investigate, how to ask questions. Were they philosophers or historians or artists? I asked them to look at the world and to see how the world was made and how people live and how long they sleep. As a matter of fact, I had many friends at the time that got very little sleep because they were working long hours. They were workers, they were working in the factory, and they had very little time to sleep, to educate their children. And so I urged my students to look at the world, to see how people live, to see how people bring up their children, By the way, I come from a working class family. My parents were workers. They used to be at a factory. Now there are very few factories around at present, but there are other factories now. There are factories with computers where people sit basically in front of computers. And understanding this change was key for my practice, so that was very difficult. And so basically my urge has always been that of investigating, trying to understand the reality, see how the world moves.
La seconda cosa che insegniamo oltre all'inchiesta è che queste cose si fanno sempre insieme, in comune, cooperando. E oggi, vedete, è più facile cooperare. È più facile cooperare perché oggi ci sono i social media e si lavora insieme. Lo sviluppo capitalistico è costretto a mettere insieme la gente. Non può più metterle insieme come le mettevi insieme nelle fabbriche, cioè come delle bestie. Deve metterle insieme in quanto singolarità intelligenti. Ecco, per questo è più facile cooperare, per questo è più facile trasformare il mondo. Se lo vogliamo, se mettiamo la volontà di farlo, la capacità di farlo. E l'inchiesta ci insegna anche questo, ci insegna a misurare la volontà, ci insegna a misurare le misure, a mettere le misure al nostro fare.
So first of all, as I said earlier on, I was teaching my students to investigate. And secondly, I taught them to investigate jointly, to join efforts, to do that together, to cooperate. And now cooperation is easier than it used to be thanks to social media. The capital development has forced us to join efforts, to work together, but now we are not working together as animals in a factory. We are joining arms, we are working together as intelligent individuals, and that's why our job is much easier if the will is there. Now we have the skills and the possibility to do that, and if we want change, we can have it.
La solitudine non si supera solamente stando insieme, lavorando insieme, facendo le cose, facendo azioni insieme. E qui bisogna starci attenti perché non basta agire, bisogna agire per un fine, bisogna agire per costruire comune. Ecco, perché altrimenti finiamo come sta finendo molti dei miei confratelli italiani dentro l'egoismo, dentro questi comportamenti fascisti che basta che uscire da questa porta e li troviamo subito in giro.
Grazie. What I want to say is also that loneliness is the worst thing, and together we can work, together we can do things, and we can overcome the problems. And we have to have one objective. We don't have to spend time together. We have to work towards one objective. Otherwise, we end up as many people that we know with selfish and fascist attitudes. And you just have to leave this door and see what the people are like, and you see that these attitudes are prevailing. Thank you.
Maybe this will jump over to still questions, remarks, comments. It's up to you.
La parola.
I don't know how to speak. I can speak in French. This is a question. I can speak in English.
I don't know.
Okay, I'll speak in English then. And you will translate. It's a question to Tommy, which is about this idea of commerce that you mentioned at a certain moment. That common for you is not public, it's not private, it's something else. And I remember that in previous discussions that we had, something that you pointed is the necessity also of establishing a form of common property. You say that there is no common without the right to have in common. And I think this is a big, this differentiates your position as a thinker of the common with others that don't think that the commons has to be expressed through a form of property. And the commons means the right to use. Yeah, the property can belong still to whoever on it, but the right to use is what will define the existence of commons. So I don't know if you want to add to this and to clarify this.
Non ho mai sostenuto che ci sia una proprietà comune. Ho sempre pensato che ci siano delle istituzioni del comune. Io non sono anarchico. Gli anarchici sostengono in effetti che il comune non ha bisogno di alcuna istituzione, né di proprietà, né di famiglia, né di nessun'altra, nessuna istituzione in generale. Io penso invece che il comune, lo stare assieme, esige istituzioni. Esige istituzioni, delle istituzioni che il comune nella durata, nel tempo, quando si combina nel tempo, eccetera, ha bisogno di istituzione. Il bisogno di istituzione è il bisogno di mettere insieme, di far durare le cose. Non ha nulla a che fare con la proprietà. Ci possono essere istituzioni del comune, e non solo istituzioni del comune, semplicemente, ma anche costituzioni non sovrane del comune. In assemblea noi trattiamo questo problema specificamente contro la proprietà. Il comune è contro la proprietà privata così come contro la proprietà pubblica, ma non è contro, è al di là, è istituzione del comune, è lo stare assieme organizzato.
Okay. Let me try this. Well, I must say that I never said that the common does not require or is any way connected with properties. I believe that we have to have institutions. I'm not an anarchist because anarchists believe that the world or the common can be organized without institution. Whereas I believe that to be together, we do need institutions, but that has nothing to do with property. Common over time requires institutions. For things to last, there must be institutions. But the common doesn't have to have properties. It goes beyond properties. There's no need for sovereign properties. In assembly, for example, we refer to that, and we believe that we are against properties, but yet the common does require institutions to organize over time.
Still one question.
This is for Antonio and anyone else, but you mentioned social media and you also written about revolutions which have taken place via social media. And I wonder if you think communication technologies that are dominant now can have an emancipatory relationship to labor, because they're also extremely exploitative.
No. Please, microphone.
Oh no, wait, there is one.
No, okay, thank you. Now about technology, we were talking about the platform, digital platform, and normally we have the tools to use in all the countries, in all the ways. I feel that it's possible now. We were talking about that Podemos from Spain, they have a use for take a decision about a new law or a change in the law. The people who use the technology. Only the people who use the platform, the digital platform. I don't know, it's a good idea. My own way to think and to make things. Not all the people use that tools. And if they have the regulation inside the party that is the way to have the decision to make a national law, I think it's enough, in my way of opinion. So it's a good tool, we use the money, but I think we need to make new, different tools, automate at the same time, really different. But not now. I am sure in Spain we have enough technological tools to make it, in my opinion. But I want to express some question about the other we talked about before. The first is when you talk, in one hand, that the communism public or private and the dream of Venice, I think it's false or it's wrong. When Venice was made, of course, who made Venice? Who is living now in Venice? Who can take a flight to come to Venice? I don't see people from Africa coming here to go for a walk. I don't see, I only see Europeans and people from Asia and money from, at the end, the common is private and public, and the people who make the city want the same. The owner of that beautiful housing, of course, and the workers who make the housing. But the other, talking about the commons, when we talk, and many people say, shouting, it was amazing. People on the squares, in Spain, in Italy, wow, 50 men in the public space. The only we fight it was a public space. It's the space where we walk day by day. And why we didn't occupy the public institution. We are talking about common institution. I say you, how many times you spend in the public institution? For what? To pay the energy, to pay license, to demand? How many times you spend in that our public institution? If you check all the square meter of public institution, not the squares, that we know as public, but the public is all. The public buildings, the city hall, all the public institution, but normally we think that no, on the street. We reclaim on the street, it's nice to reclaim on the street. But if you change and you go day by day, 100 people, 1,000 people, day by day to the public institution, the university too. But we haven't a feeling about the common institution. At the end, the university is a common institution, appear in the regulation. At the end, the students go there to listen to the teacher, like the hierarchy of the academy, and then they must to make an answer, and then the question. But at the end, who acts inside the university? On what? On make an action in the city. So, talking about the common, please, the regulation, the law that is made for the people that you vote, and you must to use in the public space that you use day by day, there are a regulation that you have the responsibility to use and make. But at the end you vote the party 4 years, and you wait till 4 years, that if they make a new law, when we talk about very important questions, euthanasia, abort, and all the war, it's okay. But the day-by-day life, nobody, the 1% of people, vote or have a tool, a technological tool or platform to say, okay, I think that it must be changed. So talking about the common, the first is to understand that the common is all, not only this public space. Where the art make action, or the museum, or in the art in the public space, but not inside the urban, the equality, the education institutions. At the end, we are working on the street for you, or museum, or biennale, like artists. I say that, and I prefer to be architects because I have more tools to attack. It's more difficult, but it's more important. So, talking about the commons, please read about your laws, read about your institution. You can go to the park, to the cinema, to the gym, to the public square. Sometimes I will go to the urban planning office for my city. Because they are designing your city. Yes, one day, not cinema, not today. Today I go to the urban planners and knock the door and say, okay, I want to be about my city. Why not? Why not? That is the common. And then you have more experience, more knowledge to say, no, it's false. So please, when we talk about the commons, I say, okay, but open mind in that question. Not only the public space and all. Okay, so.
io sono completamente d'accordo. Ma appunto la differenza è che tu la rivoluzione l'hai già fatta, mentre invece ci sono molti altri che non l'hanno ancora fatta. E quindi non so, per rispondere a quell'amico, sulle tecnologie della comunicazione. Le tecnologie della comunicazione ci hanno insegnato veramente una nuova forma del comune. È stata una grande emozione quella che ha seguito. Io mi ricordo che negli anni, appunto, negli anni 90, così, tutti i miei amici che smanettavano, no? Che inventavano loro stessi, entravano in questo mondo della comunicazione. È stata una grandissima scoperta che ha trasformato il lavoro e che ha trasformato la nostra testa in maniera assolutamente fondamentale. E fuori dubbio che questa forma di comune, che era quella che è stata appunto creata, è stata subito appropriata dal capitale. E oggi il capitalismo è un capitalismo informatico, è il capitalismo dell'intelligenza artificiale. Ed è dentro questo capitalismo e contro questo capitalismo che noi dobbiamo combattere.
I perfectly agree with what you just said. The difference is that you already have your revolution and many people still have not had their revolution. Now, to react to what the gentleman said earlier on with reference to social media and communication technologies, well, these technologies certainly taught us a lot. They taught us, they brought about important changes. I remember that in the 90s, there were the nerds at the time that were working in the world of communication technologies, and that brought about a huge discovery in that it changed dramatically both labor and our minds. And now this dramatic change has got hold of by the capital. Indeed, it is capitalism that has now a firm hold on artificial intelligence, for example, on the internet. And it is against this capitalism that we should fight now.
Sempre, come vi dicevo prima, inchiesta e associazione, inchiesta e cooperazione, dentro e contro, dentro la realtà del mondo in cui siamo e contro il comando, contro il potere che sta in questo mondo.
So, as I said earlier on, it is a combination of both investigation and cooperation that we have to bring about. We have to work inside and against, inside power and against power.
L'utopia è questa, è sono lì, dentro.
This is the utopia, to be within power.
So, thank you both for being here. Thank you for wonderful translation.